It's a sunny day outside, and so why not just stay indoors and make another jazz video? Um, I wanted to talk about All the Things You Are. It's a famous jazz standard because it represents to me like sequential process piece. That's a term I made up of my own. You won't find that necessarily in a textbook, or it won't mean the same thing. But what I mean by that is we can look at this first phrase right here, which is like, you are the promise kiss at, this is one time. Ignore the penciled in notes. They were from a long time ago. A student was trying to make up a harmony line at this. The winter seemed long. Okay, so and then it goes on from there, right? And I still think we use the same process. We try and figure out what key we're in and look at our dominant chords and things like that, and we look for cadences and stuff. And so obviously, you are the promise kiss at springtime that makes the lonely winter seem long. That's our first phrase there. And it's got 4 flats, and it's got an F minor 7 chord there, and you may think, and again, if you're coming to this and you've never seen old lead sheets, dash means minor 7. You might think, oh, we're in the key of F minor, but it doesn't sound like F minor, and we end in C major 7, which is not a normal dominant chord. And what I need to say about this is that we can still look at the end of the piece right here, right? Where it goes, when all the things you, way up high, right? Are mine. Clearly we end in A flat major, right? And this doesn't really feel like F minor anyways. It's just the beginning chord. Now, jazz songs and Broadway songs that come out of them, they don't always start on 1. And they travel around quickly. So that's fine. But if we look here, we have a C major 7 chord at the end, and we have a G7 chord, which is my 5 right there, right? Kind of thing like that. And that's the end of our phrase. And this is a 5-1 in C. It doesn't mean the whole piece is in C. It just means in the end of the first phrase, we're here because this piece is forward moving into different keys and traveling and stuff. Let's try and analyze this in the key of A flat major, and I think you'll see that it works. And then you'll see why, looking at the next phrase, I call this a sequence or process piece. So if I'm in the key of A flat major, then my A flat major chord is 1, major 1. And this is my 5-7 right there. And now we can just go backwards. This is my 2 chord, which we expect. And this is a 6, right? 6, 2, 5, 1, as opposed to just 2, 5, 1. That's a very standard thing we see in jazz, okay? And then this would be my 4 chord right here, right? 4 major 7, right? And that makes sense. So what's going on here? Well, it's interesting. I'm not saying that Hammerstein and Kern thought of this in this way, going like, aha, we'll use Neapolitan, but it's Neapolitan. I mean, they got it. They knew their music from all genres and history and things, and they also were creative. And what they said is, how do we pivot from here? And they said, well, we're just going to pivot like this. If D flat is in the key of C, then that equals Neapolitan, right? And if you're not sure what a Neapolitan chord is, that's basically a major chord on flat 2. It was a predominant chord, and it was around in use in the Baroque and classical and Romantic era quite a bit. And it's a nice shift. And there's a video I made, Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata has the most famous use of the Neapolitan chord. You can go check that out if you want to know more about Neapolitans. But if this can be Neapolitan in C, then that's 4 major 7 equals Neapolitan. That's not a 4, that means Neapolitan. And then this is my 5-7, and then my 1 major 7. Okay, and that's my phrase. It's a cool 6, 2, 5, 1, 4. It's like this circle of 5th C kind of thing, and then pivot on Neapolitan equals, sorry, D flat equals Neapolitan in C. I know Neapolitans were triads and didn't have major 7 chords, like major 7s on them, but the relationship is still there. Your bass line is still going to reflect that. It's cool. All right, then let's look at our next phrase here. It sounds suspiciously the same, right? maybe changes because we're coming out of this, but, oh, sorry. Okay, and so we have another phrase. Now, the contour is the same except for this little ending right there. Like exactly the same. The rhythm is exactly the same, and the chords look different, but they're exactly the same. What we do, which is very common in jazz, is that this chord here, which was your 1 chord, becomes usually a 2, but in this case it's going to become a 6, right? And all you do is you change your major chord into a minor chord, and it takes on a new function. In other words, when you hear this part up here, which goes, you know, your 4 major 7, and then we change key to there, okay? We've made that shift. It's delightful, unexpected, but as soon as this changes to here, it's no longer a 1 chord in our ears. It feels like something else. And usually it's 2, in this case it's 6. And if that's the case, if you look here, I'm just gonna go backwards. We're in the key of G major here. There's my 1 major, there's my 5-7. This is looking familiar, right? And A flat major is the Neapolitan in that key, in G, right? And if we are looking, this is my 6, this is my 2, this is my 5, see, dominant 7, 5, right? And you know, like if I'm in the key of E flat, then 6, 2, 5, 1, major 7, and then this would be my 4. It's exactly the same, right? Sorry, I'm using Sharpie so that it's easier to show up because it's a little further away. And so what did this piece actually do? Did it go to C major? Well, yeah, locally, but what it did was it said, let's do a phrase in the key of A flat, right? That then terminates unexpectedly in a different key. And then let's use that as a bridge to start off. It wasn't haphazard. They wanted this to become the 6th chord here so that we could be doing a phrase in E flat major. That's my key of 1, A flat, and this is my key of 5, right? And that makes a lot of sense, right? A flat major going to E flat major, okay? Because we like our pieces to start in the tonic and then move to the dominant. That's what happened there. And it's a process/sequence phrase driven piece because they made this one beautiful line with the intent of pivoting in and doing it again in a different place. And we'll find this in other pieces as well. In the future, and I'll refer back to this video, but you get an idea and then you do it again in a different area or key area or even different place in the scale sequences, right? So much about this piece says I do this and then that means I do this. Like for instance here at the beginning, this interval informs that interval, and this rhythmic and melodic gesture informs that. That felt good, let's do it again. And then let's get out of it, right? And then when we have all that, we say, let's do it again out there. So it's not random, it's a progressive/cumulative way of, an additive way of composing, and it's used all over the place. So this is a great example here, okay? Even the bridge, right? You are my, and it's like, glow that lights a star. Sorry. Over there, it's the same thing. It's a sequence of the previous phrase, right? Right, and then, okay, augmented 7. I kind of feel like this should be augmented dominant 7, but I'm not going to argue with this, although this fake book has some mistakes in it, right? But bo-do-da-dee-da is you did this, and so you do it again down a step right there, right? And then you do it again, ba-da-dee-da, right? Builds itself, okay? So this here, let's change color again so it's easy. This idea right here, right, begets this idea right there. That's a sequence. And then that whole thing gets taken down, you know, as, like, you know, it's there again, but repeated there. And so, you know, there's such great economy in how they drew this song up, because you built one idea and then you had another idea come out of it because of the first gesture and interval, and that begets the second half of it. This whole thing it was built to transpose and do it again. Your bridge has an idea which builds the second half of the idea and makes the first big phrase. And then you take the whole thing again and you do it at a different pitch level. And it was engineered so that this would be a C chord coming out of it that would push us back to it's 5 of the F chord coming up, which is then a repeat there, right? So when you're writing and you're going, what comes next? Always ask yourself, well, what came before, and should it grow? Should it progress? Should it vary? And sequences, right? Doing the same thing at a different step level, right? Or key level is important. Anyhow, let's just do these chords here. So it's like, right? So here we go. This will be my 2 in the key of G, because here's my 5 right there. And there's my 1 again, right? Right. And then if we look at this, boo-da-da-dee-da, it's the same idea. There's my 5 chord right there, right? And there's my 1 chord right there. And then this will be my 2 right there, like that. Same idea, right? And instead of having this just carry over for another measure, then they change this chord over, and this becomes 5 augmented 7 of F, which is coming up, right? And if you think about, like, let's look at our E flat major 7, right? I think that's all in the, yeah, it's in the camera, good. If we go to an augmented chord, all that happened was this went to there and we had this note, right? So it's not so different, it's just it grabs this grabs that, right? Must be a 9th. That then pushes us to there, right? That's all. So it's just morphing this a tiny bit. Honestly, if it were me, I would make sure that this was a dominant 7 with the augmented. I like the way that sounds better, but okay, I'm now recomposing or maybe accounting for a mistake that's in the transcription, not sure. This is the same as the beginning, right? And then it's like, so we have our 6 and our 2 and our 5 and our 1 and our 4. But now instead of moving on, we're gonna do a tag ending. So this is my 4, right? Major 7, right? And instead of it being a pivot chord, we're gonna make it a 4 minor 7. We didn't change key. This is a classic thing. You actually see it these days. Let's see who's done it recently. A lot of Bruno Mars things will be like, if you're here on your 1 chord, and then he does stuff, but eventually he hits his 4 chord like this, and then on his way back down to his 1 chord, instead of going through a dominant, he'll just turn it into a minor, and then to here, right? That's what is happening right there. Lots of people have done it, but it's just one modally borrowed 4. It's actually just making the note that's La or 6 in this key, which is my B. Let's see, my B. There it goes to there, and then finally to there. That's all it's doing. It's just this descending gesture. But it's cool. And then we have our 1 chord, right? All right, we're going to talk about that in a minute. But then at the end, this is 2, 5, 1. Right? And this is just for a turnaround if you're going back to the beginning, because it starts with an F chord. So we'll go 5 of 5, 5 of this chord, the local, right? So let's talk about the E7 sharp 9. Now, first off, people that transcribe fake books like this, and this is a glorious old fake book from the 80s, early 80s, where people were sitting in kitchens with turntables transcribing stuff illegally. Well, that's not illegal, but then publishing things illegally. I'm not saying how I came into contact with this, but I know that's where this came from. And so they didn't always, I mean, they're incredible skill and they're really good, but sometimes they made mistakes. And sometimes they just called things what was colloquial without thinking about it. Let's just talk about this chord right here. First off, E7, right? It doesn't fit in the key of A flat, right? And so you got to ask yourself, what is it? Well, if you look at it in this direction, or you look at it from this direction, you can either say it's just some random chord that fits the sound, or you can try and explain it with some classical theory. And I think I want to do both. Let's start with some classical theory. We go like, let's see, some, right, like there, some, and then we do our minor 4, right? Right, and so then it collapses into its major 7 chord. Right, could have gone, but I wanted to go up, right? Anyhow, so we go to here, right? That's what we have here. And you know, if you ask yourself, what is that? Well, I would call this like, I mean, let's just take a look at this for a second right there. It's almost like if we throw that into there, then it would be a common tone diminished chord with the A flat, okay? Really what it is some sort of deceptive progression, right? And you can go like, okay, so it's kind of like a common tone diminished chord, and let's talk about what that means. That means that if I have an A flat major chord right here, like this, right, A flat, and I flop myself into an E dominant 7 chord, and I've got sharp 9, flat 9. I know it says sharp 9 there, but then this is my flat 9 right there, right? That's these notes here. Well, this is this right there, and it's got the one note, and it's like it's opened up from here to. We throw our root underneath, right? It's kind of cool. So you could think of it as a regular common tone diminished chord, but I think the real thing we can look at is this. Remember that instead of just a 5 chord, we often have 2 5s, right? So this is an entourage chord that comes with this, but we're going from A flat to E flat to A flat tonic dominant there, and this is along for the ride. So let's talk about this chord right here. It has to do with something called tritone substitutes, which we've talked about in other videos, but we'll talk about it real briefly again here. Number 1, if I wanted to have a 5 chord of 5, that would be 5 of E flat, right? That would be a B flat dominant 7, yes? All right, because B flat 7 right here would go to E flat 7, which would then go to my A flat major 7, okay? And then we have something called a tritone substitute, which is that anytime you have a 5 of something, whether it's the 5 in the key or a 5 of another thing, you can use another chord that's also a dominant 7 form that's a tritone away. Tritone away from that is E7. That tritone means 3 whole steps, or a diminished 5th, augmented 4th, right? And so if we go from here, there it is. So really what this is instead of 5 of this, right? Sorry, 5 of this, it's the, so 5 of this going to 5, going to 1. It's the tritone substitute that for the 5 of this. That's what's going on there. And the sharp 9 accommodates the melody that they wanted. Doesn't matter if you have an alteration. So this is E7, sharp 9, right? You could have had B flat 7, right? With add 13, right? And that would have done the same thing, same kind of thing for the melody right there. So this is just a tritone substitute for the 5 chord leading into there. In other words, it's a fake substitute dominant, synthetic dominant to take us there. This is along for a ride. By the way, I think it's very cool as well if you think of this as being a substitute for B flat 7, because that's what it is. It's a substitute for that, okay? That we did here our 4 major 7 like this, which then turned into the minor 7 version of it. That then went to our 1 chord, right? And if you think of this being a B flat dominant 7, then it would go to a B flat minor 7, just like the major 7 went to a minor 7, and then fall into there like that, right? So it's kind of doing the same thing, although a little less obvious because it's done a tritone substitute. Yeah, tritone substitute for this. Pseudo common tone diminished chord. It's not quite a diminished chord, but it's jazz. And, you know, so it gives us a deceptive progression, something we weren't expecting, and then this is a sub for the 5 of this, and I just threw the 2 in front, and it actually forms the same kind of collapsing from B flat dominant into the B flat minor, just like the D flat major going into the D flat minor before it goes there. Anyways, this whole thing is just a bunch of repeated ideas at different pitch levels, which means that it's sequential. It's a sequentially driven or made piece, right? In the beginning, all you have to write is this at the beginning, and then it drives the rest to there, and then this is that there, and then you repeat the whole thing at a different pitch level, and you engineer this so it's going to get there smoothly, and then your bridge, right? And then it's like, well, same kind of thing, just a smaller amount of it, and then do it again, right? And same thing, just that same, right? So you didn't have to write too much. I'm not saying it's hard. It's really hard to be economical, but if you see the system employed, then you can see how they thought of this in an ingenious way. They thought about the form and how it's going to be driven by making itself again and again and again, right? Which, you know, you could argue is what Bach did with most of his fugues and things, okay? Memorizing this piece becomes really easy because you say, I'm in the key of A flat, and I go 6, right? And then I'm going to go 2, right? To there, right? Then I'm going to go 5, right? And I'm going to go 1. So it's all just a circle of 5th sequence, and you can keep going to my 4 chord. And now you're just going to pivot and say, call that Neapolitan. So we're going to go, right? And then you just say, I just need to do the same thing again, but now I'm going to be in the key of E flat, right? The dominant. So I change this into a minor chord, and then it's going to come to here, and then it's going to go to there, my dominant, and then to my 1, right? And then I go to my 4, which and then that becomes my Neapolitan for here, right? Right, sorry, and then to my 1, right? And then I'm going to go 2, 5, 1, 2, right? 5, 1, right? Now I'm just going to take it all just a chromatic mediant away to the 3 or the E major key, right? So now I'm in the key of E, right? And so I just give my 2, my 5, right? And then I turn that into that's really all that's happening there as we get this. That takes us back to there, a lot of dissonance. And then we just do the same thing again, right? We have an ending we have to memorize, which is super cool. All right, hope that was fun or useful.